let's go way back and tell me the earliest years of the farming lifestyle that you've been living. You were at where and when and what?
I vaguely remember milk cans. We used to milk and dump them into the cans, the old Surge bucket milkers, and we would dump that into the cans that were then cooled there in the old dairy. And my sister and I would ride up to the corner off of Folly Quarter Road, and there was a milk stand there, and we would we'd watch Dad unload them. The milk cans were bigger than we were, so. But that's my earliest recollection of the dairy farm and working with the cattle and stuff.
Would you mind telling us how old you are now?
I'm 61.
Who's the youngest guy in the room? But don't tell him. All right, so Howie, let me get it correct now, you just have one sister?
No, I have 3 sisters and a brother, but she was older than me, and the 2 of us rode with Dad to put milk cans out.
I think you have more than a sister?
Yes, we have. I have 3 sisters and a brother.
Okay. Were they all involved in farming at some point as they grew up?
Oh yeah. We were all raised there and had our chores to do and helped with pretty much anything we could do.
And where is there?
There is at 3807 Waltan Drive, which is off of Triadelphia Road.
How big is that farm?
It's 101 acres.
Always been 101?
Yes. Well, it was 107 at one point before my wife and I bought that 6 acres off of it.
To build on?
Yes.
Not to farm on?
No.
So who owned this farm? Is that when you were growing up?
Dad did. Dad bought it in 1957.
And he got it from?
Mr. Wirt. Mr. Wirt used to have part ownership in the Musselman Cannon Company in Sykesville. Remember that, Art?
Was it apples?
Yes. Yeah, the apple butter
Apple butter.
place, yeah.
Just this side of Sykesville River. There was an apple cannery. Sykesville. The building's still there, isn't it?
I believe it is, yeah.
So it was 107 acres then, and Mr. Wirtz let it go for approximately how much?
Oh, I have no idea what it was bought for. I do know Dad borrowed $500 from one bank to put a deposit down on the other bank so that he could buy it. So
You were not born?
Yeah, in 1954 I was.
No, I meant before, at the purchase time. You were already living in Boone?
Yeah.
With your dad, and then while you were young, at that point, your dad decided to buy the farm?
Correct.
Okay. What did your dad buy the farm for? I mean, financially, but its purpose?
He wanted to farm, dairy farm,
Very
and he had worked there as a manager, so he got to know the farm, before. And when Mr. Wirt wanted to get some money for another financial venture, he sold our farm to Dad, and he sold the apple butter place to somebody else to get money for doing something else.
And out of politeness for me, fiddle with your fingers, but not with the wire.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It makes a sound.
Okay.
So that farm that Mr. Wirtz had, which has now become your farm, did you all ever give it a name?
It was Mary Acres when we bought it, and it's Mary Acres today.
Spelled in Mary?
MERRY, ACRES.
Okay. So here we are, young Howie, and your dad is taking on this farm, which he had experience from Mr. Wirtz prior because
He was hired there.
farmhand there.
Right.
Okay. And so what was going on the farm just before he bought it then? It was a farm?
Dairy farm. It was a dairy farm. They were shipping milk out of there.
Okay.
What did you raise on the farm? Did you have hay?
We had hay, we had alfalfa hay, we had corn silage, and we had barley. So we could make straw for the bedding of the animals. We chopped most of the corn, and we did a lot of alfalfa hay, alfalfa orchard mix.
Who did your thrashing, or did you have combine or bale?
In my day, we hired different people to do the combining, but the stories were always that several of the neighbors got together during thrashing time and went all the way up and down Philadelphia
You
Road.
remember thrashing?
No, I remember the combines. I don't remember the thrashing. The combines were very small compared to today.
See, I remember thrashing.
Yeah. Remember, I'm the youngest one here.
So you're at this farm, you're living on the top floor or somewhere, you have your own bedroom, or you're sharing it with somebody?
Yeah, my brother and I had a bedroom on the front of the old house, and my three sisters were in the second floor upstairs in the almost an attic type, top of the house.
One day your dad turned to you and said, Howie, come out here with me, you're gonna help.
I guess he did, because I was usually out there anyway.
You were just attracted to what your dad was doing?
Oh yeah, we lived right there, so we were right around the farmstead, and we were always out there. In fact, they used to leave us in a picket fence that we figured out how to get up on a porch and jump off of, so we could be with them, and then get yelled at, and put back where we belong.
That's good.
So.
At some point, I mean, you were watching a lot of what was going on, right? Did you get to go down? I'm assuming there was a barn, right?
Oh yeah, I was down. We would go down and watch the cows, and then we got to the point where we were in charge of sweeping in the grain, throwing hay bales into them, things that we could do. Dad had bought the smallest New Holland baler, so it made the smallest bales so we could handle the bales. And we did a lot of, we did most of the stacking from the age of, 6, 7, 8. I can remember, doing what we could, even if you just rolled them to the guy that was stacking. And then with the cattle, we'd like give them their extra grain or something when we'd have to fill the wheelbarrow half full, so we could pick it up and roll it. So.
Now that was you and your brother, or were your sisters out there?
My sister was there a fair amount, but because I was the boy, they had me doing a lot of the things later. But my sisters were very active. They fed calves at an early age, and my brother's 4 years younger than I am, and he took his turn at everything when that came along.
So you were to show your little brother how to do stuff, brother.
Yes. Yeah, I could say I taught him everything he knows, but he'd disagree.
Do you remember about when you didn't use milk cans anymore?
I believe it was in '69, so I would have been 14, 13.
Well, the years were.
Yeah.
That's
So.
what other people report too.
Yeah, but they, I can remember that was a big deal to put the milk tank in because it was a lot of cost of money. And when it went to that, but boy, it made life easier because the truck could pump it right out of that tank.
It also increased your electric bill a bit too.
Yes.
So your dad was on the farm before you, obviously. Mr. Wirtz and him were doing farming. Did your dad ever tell you any stories about early days of farming with your dad's farming experiences?
Yeah, that's how I knew about that. They would thrash up and down Philadelphia Road. All of them would share the thrashing, guys as they came along. And then they would share, they used to share a drill and a corn planter together.
I don't know, I'm formulating here. So was that when Ed Frank was going around?
There were several thrashing operations going on.
Guys.
I don't know which ones your father used.
I'm not sure. I would guess it would be, Frank's were right at the end of our road, so it was probably
Frank, same as we had.
probably the same one.
It was a real train. I mean, it was a
Just putting in a blood
tractor,
it's just a blood pressure.
fuel, baler.
Right. I mean, from what I understand, it was quite an ordeal.
It went down the road maybe 3 miles an hour.
So, Wertz, what's your dad's first name?
Bernard.
Wertz taught Bernard farming, or
They-
did Bernard teach Wertz farming?
A little of both, but Dad had farmed out at the end of Triadelphia Road for a little bit as a young man, and then came back to the farm, hired as a hired hand to help the Wertz, and he worked for Mr. Bandel, Alan and Donnie's dad. He worked under him for a while, and then they bought their farm out Triadelphia Road, and then Dad was the hired hand. And then after a couple of years of full-time hired hand, then he got the opportunity to buy the farm.
Did your dad ever relate to you how any of his experiences about farming without electricity?
No, I don't think he was actually farming without electricity, although he worked as a kid at the farm at the end of Triadelphia on the other side of 144. He went over and helped them thrash and bring in loose hay. And I guess, when was electricity invented? I don't know.
Well, the farm opposite Triadelphia was Mercer.
Right, the Mercer farm. He would help them as a teenage kid. The inspector for the Maryland Co-op that was buying milk and stuff, and he got a lot of his know-how from his dad just going to farm to farm to farm as an inspector and all.
Did your father ever hear, or do you know of any prisoners who may have been on your farm back Triadelphia Road?
Yeah, they talk about the prisoners that used to help, do the different tasks during the war, and that, as far as I know, he was never in charge of any of those, though. They were always in charge with somebody else. But I had heard all that.
Okay. So your dad operated farming at some point without bringing water in separately? I don't know the time period, but I'm trying to determine whether or not he had to deal with, number one, electricity coming in, and number two, getting water to use on the farm. Remember where they were getting their water supply, for instance?
From the earliest age, we were getting it from a spring down over the hill that had a pump. It was an old piston pump that was forever being worked on. And I stood at the top many a day handing down pipe wrenches or screwdrivers, adjustable wrench, anything that he was going to need. I was at the top of the pit and he was at the bottom.
And that was an electric pump?
It was an electric pump, yeah.
And how did your dad do that before the electric pump?
They have a hand-dug well there at the farm, but I believe the whole time he was there they had electric. Now back...
I've heard of having a hand pump.
No. Don't remember that. Right. I know what you're talking about, but I don't believe... And I never saw one of those at our farm. So, but there is a hand-dug well there.
So, your typical farm day when you were a kid, can you describe that?
Generally, they'd get me up. We'd go down, and usually the cows were in the process of being milked because they wouldn't have us get up that early. But about the time Dad got halfway done milking, then we were to come down, or usually it was me because I ended up being the boy. So swept the feed in, would give the cows their extra feed, and then would begin to, as he finished milking, I would take the empty milkers up and start disassembling them, wash them, do whatever you needed to do, like that. Now, if I was at school during school days, then generally we didn't have to go to the barn. We were able to just get up, go to school, and he pretty much took care of things. But then in the evening, we picked back up. We would clean the barn. We used to scoop the manure out of the gutters, but then the big invention was the barn cleaner. So the barn cleaner then would it was a big chain that drug the manure around and took it right out to the spreader. So that was a big change for us. So we didn't have to shovel anymore.
All these implements, manure spreader and all that, you didn't use horses or anything?
No. No, I was after
What
horses.
were some of the tractors that you had, do you remember?
We had an MT John Deere, we had a 530 John Deere, we had a 630 John Deere, we had a Minneapolis Moline, and then we got into the 4020 and what we're operating now. So it was a transition there. I can remember the manure spreader used to be wheel driven, and when we got a PTO driven one that you didn't have to rely on the ground turning the wheels, that was a big change to me. I mean, I know, the older guys made a lot bigger changes than that, but that was something that was, if you've ever slid a manure spreader when it wouldn't run the beaters, it was neat to just have the PTO run it and you didn't have to worry about where the wheels were, so made a big difference.
Tell us about the guys operating the old versions. What
The-
story, do you remember them?
The old version of the manure spreaders? Well, the older ones had the wheels drove the beaters and the drag chain, and so if the wheels broke
Wheels on
traction,
the ground.
yeah, if the wheels broke traction, then everything in the manure spreader would stop because everything was spinning. So you were fine on most dry days, but if you went out there and tried to spread a little bit on some snow or muddy ground, then the wheels would slide, so you had to not fill the spreader too full so that it didn't, jam up on you because you would overload what it was able to do. PTO, you could fill those rascals up in the PTO as long as no chains or anything broke. You can shove all the manure through them you possibly can.
That was all chain driven.
Yeah.
The steel wheel manure spreaders had cleats on them.
Right, they were
And
probably,
they wore down, so after a while, they were useless.
yeah. But I can remember having like rear tractor tires on the spreader, and if they broke traction, you slid.
Well, they had tread,
Right,
and that wore down.
right. So,
But the PTO, like I said, is driven by the tractor itself. The motor, the engine going down through the transmission is what's turning the manure spreader, making it work.
Yeah.
Depends on the wheels.
yeah.
Those, I didn't know about the older ones, so.
Mm.
Okay, so we're gonna stay with that young life on the farm and give, we're gonna look for some more experiences in that time
Okay.
period, okay? So, you obviously had homework,
Oh, yeah, that I didn't want to do.
but the school thought you should.
Right.
How did you manage this? You got a morning, a school day, let's go with the rest of the sequence. You just got home from school. But how
Then
did you-
we were to change our clothes, we could get a snack, and then we were to be out, getting ready to help with the barn work. We would get as you went through the barn, if they had stayed in over the winter time, you had to take and separate the manure and the straw and get that into the gutter, then scoop that, put it into the manure spreader. Through the summer when we didn't have school, we would do that during the daytime, but after school you got home, you did all that. Then you began to feed the heifers. You usually did the heifers first, so that then when the cows were brought in to be milked, any milk that you used from that to feed calves was available to you. Plus we used a lot of milk replacer back in the day, and we would transition the calves from bottles to buckets, and we would always go through that week that you taught them how to drink out of a bucket. And we usually have anywhere from 25 to 35 calves that the herd would produce. The rest of them were bull calves out of the 45 to 50 head of cows that we had. That was on a good year. So
Did you have any other animals besides the cows?
back when I was small, we had chickens for a while, and it was our job that when it came time to butcher the chickens, we were to hold the chicken's legs. When Dad cut the head off, then we were to take and run as far as we could with it,
Well, how
so
did
that
you
the
cut
blood.
heads off?
Dad would use a hatchet. So then,
Stump.
yeah, and a stump, and then we were to take off running and then drop it 20 or 30 feet so it didn't throw blood all over him. Because that's what a chicken with its head cut off does. A little gruesome, but
Did you have steers?
No, we did try steers later on, when I was older, but we may have done that for a year or so, and they were so horrible to the fences because they were big and pushy and shovey, so we only did that for a year or two. And we also found it wasn't real profitable because we were doing Holstein bull calves and making steers out of them, and that really wasn't the better meat, and it really didn't bring the better prices. So we kind of gave up on that pretty quickly.
So you were saying that, I guess it was you, what was that? The cows of old days didn't give as much milk as they give today.
Right.
What was the ratio in the morning, let's say, one milking a cow was in the old days versus what it is currently?
You want a daily production or
No,
just
one milking.
one milking in the
like
morning?
2.5 gallons.
Yeah, it was probably 2.5 gallons, where we would actually have, we had 5-gallon milkers that actually were just about full sometimes on the better cows, which was maybe 10% of the herd.
And Holsteins generally give more milk than all the others anyway.
Yeah, we started out with a cross of Ayrshire Holstein, and we bred them to be pretty much pure Holstein, just because with the breeding co-op we were able to do that. We didn't need a bull or anything, so that put the artificial insemination into gear, and that really made a big step up with production also. So by the time we went out of business, we had 11 cows, I think, that milked over 100 pounds.
Can you imagine what a cow's bag must look like holding 5 gallons?
I've seen some pretty big ones, yeah.
A lot of that milk, though, is produced as the cow is milking, so that, with that blood flow and all, a lot of that, the udder held a good bit, but that mechanism all kicks in and starts making milk. And a lot of milk, it doesn't have to store it all up. It makes some of it as it's going along too. So, but some of those udders were getting pretty large.
All right, so you were growing up, did your brother stick with you on the farm, and you both kept working the farm together?
The whole family worked right up until they graduated from high school. When they graduated high school, my sister went to college. When I graduated from high school, I went to work for a surveyor for 3 years. And at that point, my little brother, who's 4 years behind me, he was deciding what he wanted to do, and my sisters that were twins, they were helping and doing what they could with that. But when they graduated, they went on and took jobs, with school system, and one worked for one of a Czech printing company. But they had no interest to stay in the farm. I worked for 3 years with the surveying company. That gave my brother time to make a decision, and he didn't want to stay on the farm. So after 3 years, when he was about to graduate, then I came back. So, because of us being 4 years, he was a senior then. He was out on work release. So I came on back and started partnering up with Dad.
So who was working the farm then for those 3 years that you?
Well, Dad was, with the help of my younger sisters and brother.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's the oldest type of machine you can remember on your farm? Like a side delivery rake or a dump rake or a sickle bar mower or anything like that?
We used sickle bar for years. We had side delivery, rake that we used. We had an old Brilliant crimper that we used to run behind that sickle bar. They had one that had a PTO shaft behind, right straight behind the mower mechanism, so that you could actually mow a swath and be crimping a swath at the same time.
And this was all before you made bales?
No, the whole time I remember we made bales.
Created a row.
Right, we made a windrow and then used a baler, and Dad, like I said, got the baler that made the smallest bale that it could when we got, so he could use us, and we had smaller bales to handle.
They were boxy barrel.
Yeah, they were pretty small. Right, they were little square bales.
About 80 pounds is about as small as they made it.
Well, these though were down, we could get them down to 40, between 40 and 50 pounds, yeah. Yeah, it was a real small chamber on the baler.
And why was that?
So that us kids could handle them, and he could turn us loose as kids, and he could be baling while we were unloading. So we could handle those bales. The big, 100-pound bales, we couldn't pick them up. They were heavier than we were.
And all those bales were string or cord or?
String, yeah. I never handled the wire, but I did help Dad get remember they used to have a motor on the balers
Yeah.
before the PTO, and you'd had to get the motor started in order to get the baler going. And I remember that's pretty much where I learned to cuss.
Either a Continental or a Wisconsin engine?
Usually Wisconsin was what was on there. So between that and the elevator that had the motor on it, we learned.
So Howie, let's face it, you got twice as many bales of hay than the average farm.
Right.
Yeah,
So
they're only half size.
Where did the bales go after you got them up?
We put them in the barn up above the milking barn. They were in a loft that we would fill. And once it got too high to throw the bales, then we had one of those little New Holland. Actually, we started with the big elevator that was 50 feet long that you drop them in sideways and they went up. And then when they came out with them, the New Holland made a bale elevator with the forks that would grab. You would stick the bale on it and it would take it up. And we handled a lot. Today we still use that type of elevation to get them up into the hayloft.
You probably did it full with loose hay then, but your father ever relayed any how he got loose hay?
Oh yeah, that was.
Barn, how he got it in the barn?
Yeah, I mean that was always done with horse and wagon, or then I think they would use some tractors at times. And then Chris probably told you about losing part of his fingers to the rope. We heard that story several times, that if my Uncle Herman hadn't tripped it, he would have lost maybe more than just the first couple.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, just the stories I heard was that he was a kid and he was riding the rope down that was pulling the load of hay. Fork load of hay would go up and then it would roll across the top and then it would trip and drop it where you needed it. Well, when that pulley that lifts that up was usually a team of horses that pulled it straight out from the barn, and there was a pulley at the bottom. Well, Chris would ride that rope because it was tight, and his finger then got right to the pulley before he let go. And if they hadn't tripped the load to take the pressure off, he may have lost more of his fingers than he did. He didn't tell you that story?
I think they had.
That's why his one hand is, the finger's short on it. But it's just one of the little farming accidents that, that I heard about.
Uh-huh.
Well, there was all kinds of ways to get hurt.
Right,
Did you
yeah.
walk on yourself?
Other than falling off of wagons, or I guess one of the scariest moments that I can remember is we were jump starting a tractor, and we had a loader tractor pushed against the back of a old John Deere, and my dad was in a big hurry, so he didn't want to hook to the front and pull it. So he tried pushing it. Well, it was a hand clutch, and when I pushed the hand clutch in to start it, the tractor then took the seat and pushed me right up against the steering wheel, because when you put the pressure to turn the engine over, well, that put the pressure on me and scared me pretty good, and it was all I could do then to get the clutch back because he had shoved me forward. So it could have turned out pretty serious, but it was okay. And other than, we were one time out in the field, we were goofing off down by a stream when the Angus bull got out, and it, headed down through the field. Well, we were out in the field also, but we ended up getting up safely back up to the house. So that wasn't too bad an issue.
When you were real young, did the cows and the bulls ever chase you and scare you to death?
They scared me a little bit, but most of the time, only when they had calves. And we knew to stay away from the bull. I did get run by a chicken that had peeps one time. I was messing with her, and when I turned to run, I tripped, and she came right up my back to let me know she was the boss of the chickens. So it was just one of those little things as a kid you remember.
When you were young then, do you remember any weather experiences, how that affected your farming? Because, weather can do that.
I can remember we used to have a big water tank out behind the barn that actually it trickled in there all the time. So that was always full of water, and we had lost power during a blizzard. I believe it was in '58, so I was only like 4 years old. But I can remember trying to help carry water from that tank. We would dip it out of that tank and take it to the heifer's water tank because we didn't have, the pump wasn't working. So we would dip out of that tank, which had, several hundred gallons in it. And I know, I remember doing that, but I'm sure I probably just held on to the same bucket Dad had or something just to make believe I was helping. But I can remember being out there and walking from the one barn to the other, trying to get water to the cattle.
Did you ever have any of your crops wiped out during the summer, any kind of bad thunderstorm?
I can remember, the barley fields every once in a while, if a heavy storm came through, would mat it all down, but it generally then we could get under most of it with the combine. I can remember one year Dad actually went and bought these little swoopy things. I don't know what you call them. They were down crop lifter type things, and you put them on the guards to the front of the combine so that it would slide under there and pull the crop up and into the throat so it could be cut. And I can remember putting them on one year because it was so close to the ground. You couldn't get it up otherwise.
That's
So.
one reason why people didn't like barley, because they're bearded and they stick to each other. You can't get them apart.
Yeah, it was.
And they really itch and scratch too.
Yeah, it was always
People
an
like barley.
itchy time and grasshoppers in it and everything else. But I remember we put it in, we used that same elevator. We would unload the smoker wagons, which were those gravity-fed wagons, and they would funnel down into the elevator and run it up and drop it in the hole. And as it filled, we would take boards and keep building the bin up as it went, because that's how you got it out. Then you took those boards out and shoveled it into bags.
Did you have silos?
Yes, we had an
How
up.
about telling us a little bit how those things work?
Well, we had an upright silo that when we chopped the corn, we used that same 50-foot elevator, John Deere elevator, and it had a tray that the truck would dump in, and it would run up, and they had a guy up in top taking a fork and spreading it out and packing it down as we filled the upright. And then we had one of the first trench silos in Maryland is on our farm, where they dug a ditch and we had a concrete back on it, and you started out as you filled your trucks with insulage, then you dumped it in, got to the point where then you could go over the top and you rolled it down and spread it out, and you packed that in to try and get as much air and that would help with the fermentation of it. So you would get the air and all packed out of that, and I can remember every once in a while one of the trucks would break down and wouldn't lift up, and then or one would get hung up in there, and the guy rolling it, then we'd have to hook a chain to it, or they would hook a chain to it. When I got old enough, that was one of my jobs, was to open tailgates, and then if somebody got in trouble, I was to grab a chain and get hooked to the tractor and truck, and so they could pull them out. And that whole Dave Monix they had a self-propelled chopper that they would chop. Later on, we actually got a 2-row chopper of our own, and we filled silo ourselves for a couple of years just to try and save some money on it.
And you said the silo got the stuff from the bottom to the top, but what was the mechanism that went up?
It was that elevator, the elevator that we used for hay bale.
Is it little troughs, or is it an auger?
Oh no, it was a chain the auger the elevator sat out and had a hoist that raised and lowered it, and we put it over the top of the silo, and then the chain that went around that was slats, and it took that, and then every once in a while the chain would break, so then you'd have to fix the chain and reinitialize everything and go again. So, but that was one of the implements that had a gas engine on it, and then we actually converted it over to PTO. By the time I was a teenager, we had a PTO that we could put on there, and we ran that with a chain that drove it instead of the chain being driven by that Wisconsin motor. That was another pretty big invention. So we figured that out. But when the trench silo was there, then we dig the trench silo out with we had an Alice Chalmers loader tractor, and it didn't have a two-way cylinder on the front bucket, so when you tripped it into the solids cart, if you could do it just right, it would bounce back up. But if you didn't do it just right, then you had to back up and let it down and click it back in and then scoop again. So that's all those fun times, you know.
So, you got a lot of chances to do a lot of equipment learning.
Oh yeah.
What's your favorite piece of equipment?
Well, I love to, you know, run them all. I mean, they all amaze me. You know, I guess a round baler would probably be one of the things nowadays that I really enjoy. That and the square baler itself, you know, I enjoy running that. I guess if there was one job that I really like, which we're not allowed to do anymore, and that is plow, because you could really see what you had accomplished, because you look back and there's all 4 furrows were turned up, you know, that or disking. And you know, when you start leveling a field after you've plowed it, that's just, the reward is instant, you know. So, which baling hay is instant too. A lot of it's, you know, instant gratification. So I just enjoy the whole, pretty much everything we do, except picking up rocks. Never.
Back when we used to plow, it turned over worms, and the seagulls came all the way down from the bay up there to get the worms.
Right.
Can't do it.
So,
It's no-till.
Right.
educate me to what happened to the plowing?
They no longer, everything is no-till. They don't want you to turn ground anymore because of all the pollution of the bay and the runoff and all that. You try now not to work ground at all, compared to when you worked it all the time. And now, you know, in my lifetime, it's totally changed to where the machinery now just puts a slit in, drops a seed, you know, and so there's no plowing, churning, you know, and all that kind of stuff.
However, in order to pull this instrument, this machine through there and plow, make these furrows and put the seed down in the ground, it takes a powerful machine to pull that thing. We're talking about $200,000 machines that do all that.
Yeah, because it's, you know, they have to be bigger and better to pull a
And
machine,
small.
because they're basically doing the whole process with one pass over the field.
Sundays came when you were little. What was your family's Sunday like?
Sunday, we'd get finished up at the barn as soon as we could, packed everybody, cleaned up, and went to church. And when we got back from church, then Dad would usually watch a football game or baseball or something. He did usually rest, unless there was something crop-wise that maybe we had to go bale, or if we were in the middle of, you know, springtime, you needed to get something planted or things like that. He would get us all, you know, to work. And on Sundays, we weren't afraid to work on Sundays, but we did try to take Sundays off as much as we could. But we were farmers, so we milked then again in the evening and fed the calves and did all, you know, all our chores, you know, for the taking care of the animals. That pretty much happened all the time. So
Yeah, we didn't do much on Sunday either, but if we saw a big storm coming over there, we're gonna get the hay before it
Right,
gets wet,
right.
even if it's Sunday or not.
yeah, you just you had to reprioritize. So.
Did he take you visiting?
Yeah, we didn't go very many places. We'd go to my grandfather's place every once in a while. Probably 2, maybe 3 times a year, I'd go to my grandmother's house. She had a house down by the bay that they were on, one of the inlets there. So I've actually been on a boat that went under the Bay Bridge. So that was a big deal to us kids, you know. But, you know, that was one of those day trips where you milked the cows, went down there, and then came right back and milked again. So everything was done, you know. We would go to, Dad liked history, so we would go to Gettysburg and see some of the battlefield things, and then we'd come back home and milk. You know, we'd just milk a little later in the evenings. That was our life, because everything revolved around milk cows.
Did Dad belong to any farm organizations?
He was a member of Farm Bureau for a while. I don't believe he was ever on the board or anything. He was on the board for soil conservation. He did serve on that for a lot of years. other than that, he wasn't, he didn't belong to any other organizations that I can remember. And he did, as he got older, he liked to golf, so he would get out and golf a little bit, as he got older. And older, I'm meaning, in his 70s. So he took up the game pretty late, but he seemed to really enjoy it. He and Mom would go together at least once a week until their health ran out on them. So.
Did we discuss your children and farming?
Yeah, my kids came. They fed the calves when they were growing up. They did real good at it. At that time, we bottle fed, switched to a bucket when we could. They'd help me get the cows in the evening, just like I had. Always tried to get them done and over their chores as quick as possible to get them back, because I knew how important school was and getting their homework and stuff done. Part of when I was growing up, Mom and Dad, I'm sure, did the same thing, but I just didn't push to do homework as much as my kids did. They were always a lot better than that. So, but they learned how to drive a little stick shift S10. They would drive from their house where we lived when we got married around the front of the farm on the driveway, and they'd come out our driveway, go across the front of the farm without getting on the highway, and go back in our farm driveway. And that's how they learned how to drive. And they've always been pretty good with their vehicles because they got that early education. They were doing that. They were 10, 11 years old.
Chevrolet truck, right?
Yes.
S10, you call it. I remember that's code for.
So, farming then and farming today, let's compare the two.
Wow, it's such a challenge now because all the regulations and things that are out there that we have to abide by. The great thing is we've got chemicals, and we've got bigger tractors, and we've got when I say chemicals, they're safe chemicals now. This isn't post Vietnam, when all the chemicals that the companies were discovering hadn't been tested because they were used through war. They came back, they went through those tests and things, and so a lot of people associate that all the pesticides and herbicides are similar to those, and they're not that way anymore. Most of them have all been refined to the point where they're very safe. They know exactly how much to put on per acre for what's there. The machinery's nice. I mean, we have 3 tractors now that have cabs on them. We never used to have a cab. You were out there, in the wind blowing, cold, didn't matter. So equipment's a little more modern, but the margin for making money is, because the cost of those things are there, and you really don't get that much more money. We gave up the dairy farm because we just couldn't. We were losing so much ground to development, and we couldn't expand the herd, and we really couldn't get the quantity discounts and the bulk of things because we weren't quite big enough to do that. So that's when we kind of switched over to what we do today, which is boarding horses and make a lot of hay. So it's been a long transition over the years, and you try and think everything and every possibility that was going to go right or wrong, and we were lucky a lot of times, and we had things worked out and we made it work. So because of growing up on the farm, we knew perseverance was probably the best thing we had going for us. So you stick with it, and it'll come to you.
Now the best thing you got going for is a computer and GPS.
Yeah, I guess GPS is wrong half the time. At least in our area, it is.
The farm machinery today, what they can do with GPS and keeping just enough fertilizer or whatever it is, and seed without overlapping even 1 inch.
Right.
GPS.
Everything is very exact.
It's awesome. Money saving.
So every time you cross.
Tractor or something?
Yeah, some have. We don't have that, but some of the large grain guys now today, they have GPS guidance systems that actually map their fields as they put the first lap around, and then they can It will mark every pass they make. It keeps them, that within that 3 or 4 inch tolerance, and it, and that saves you. I mean, if you're going along and you start to veer off and you start lapping by a foot or 18 inches, well, you've lost production, and that's how close everything nowadays. There's just doubling up 2 rows is a loss of production, and you don't want to have that happen. So.
I mean, if it's 10% of things that should have been done, that's 10% more cost. The whole project costs you.
Right.
And seed and fertilizer.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then they've also got some ways of looking at the ground and tell you where the fertilizer is most needed in one area.
Well, as you harvest, it's the IQ, what they call the IQ, which as the machine goes along and it takes a pass of harvesting, say, the corn or the wheat, it's monitoring what the bushels per acre is. And as it does that, it maps it. So then you can look at that and you can actually take that same overlay, and when you put your nutrients there for the next season, it knows where the field was best and where it was worst, and it simulates that, will increase putting fertilizer down or decrease putting fertilizer down. So there's no waste, involved. Whatever it calls for is exactly what that's getting, and it really, I mean, that is a big savings. And we all fuss about the nutrient management plans and things like that, but they've made us better farmers, because as farmers do, we adjust to the times and we make it work. So.
And it's amazing today when I see cornfields how closer they've gotten the rows, and how many corn stalks are going down each row.
Yeah,
It's probably like 500% increase on what you can get per acre.
Yeah.
Than what it used to be. Particularly up in Pennsylvania, you see that people plant.
Well, they're bouncing right off of 200 bushel crops for corn,
It's amazing.
which, back in the day, if you were getting 30 to 40 bushel,
It's per acre.
per acre, that's the technology has really come along. But there again, then you're paying for all that technology. You're paying more for fertilizers and seed, machinery, the whole, everything. All your input costs are so high, yet the grain itself is almost where it was, 100 years ago. So it's we've made production work for us, where if we had stood still, we wouldn't even be feeding this country. There's no way we could have.
Asking where farming's headed in the future.
Yeah. I wonder what is it I just heard?
That was a carbon one.
Okay. So where do you think farming is headed in the future?
We're going to be here. We're going to be, making our own food for this country. I think this country has the ability to continue feeding itself for centuries from now. We might, I believe our technology will bleed over into other countries so that they can feed themselves. And we're going to be here just because farmers are the resilient type of people that they are, and they're not going to walk away from something, and it's a job that they know they need to do, and they're going to continue to take technology and use it as best they can, and they're going to do everything they can to keep their families staying on the farm if they can. There are a lot of family farms that have gone by the wayside, but I think there's still there will be enough, because of technology, there will be enough of us left to keep feeding this world. And so I'm optimistic that we're going to be here a long time from now, and we're going to be able to feed ourselves. So that's.
Last question. A youngster comes to you and says, "I'm thinking about being a farmer." What would you tell them?
Get as much education as you can. Work with technology as much as you can. Get the experience you can from on the farm working. Don't let anybody tell you that it's the worst thing you can do in your life to be a farmer, because it's not. There's a lot of future out there for the youngsters to come along, and several people always told me I was nuts for staying on the farm and doing what I did, but I'd rather be nuts than do something else. So I would encourage the kid. I mean, I've encouraged a lot of kids that have come through our farm, and if they don't work at farming, a lot of them have actually branched into agriculture type things, or they'll learn to run machinery and things, and they take that knowledge and go with it. So I try to always, keep it a positive light to those kids and keep them going. So there's a future there, and there's no reason to, diminish it by, putting it down. So.
Since you are president, how about promoting the Farm Bureau?
Yeah, everybody, if everybody can be a member of Farm Bureau, that really helps us, go to work down in Annapolis and in DC, because Farm Bureau is who goes to work for the farmer off the farm. There's so many bills and there's so many legislation and so much, restrictions that we're being put upon with, and without Farm Bureau being there. I didn't used to be a big Farm Bureau advocate, but the more I've gotten into it, the more I see we can't live without them anymore. If there wasn't somebody, because our voices are so small, because of the number that we are, politicians and things go by, the numbers instead of what is right. And Farm Bureau helps to make sure things are right and going forward. So go for it.